Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on planet Earth. It is daybreak here. We stayed the night in the house last night. First time in months I've stayed in the house. And oddly enough, it was so quiet and it doesn't move like the boat. Our boat doesn't move much, but it surprised us. We kept waking up all night. Anyway, this is a slightly different and slightly somber video, and I'm doing it early in the morning because we have an incredibly busy day ahead of us, so I won't have time to do anything later on. Where was I when the Panorama interview aired, and how did it affect me? Because I'd like to know where all you guys were and how it affected you, if at all, or if you didn't care. But I distinctly remember it, because I'd have to cast my mind back to 1994. Thomas, my then boyfriend, had been sent to prison yet again. Driving offences, I think. I can't remember specifically. And when he got out, I think it was 94, he was sent to prison. There was such a lot that happened between 94 and 97, in fact from 94 to 2000. It's hard to remember the exact dates, but when he got out of prison, he joined a jazz band. He's actually very good at playing the bass, acoustic bass, electric bass, and he wanted to join a band because he wanted to do something positive with his life. That's what he said. Anyway, they were all blokes, and I was fully supportive, and he said, we're advertising for a pianist. Then he said someone came to audition for the piano, and we gave him, the role. He's called Sam. So for months he was going off on Tuesday and Thursday nights to play with this jazz band, and often came back talking about Sam. Well, I can't remember the exact date, but it was the night that the Dimbleby interview aired with Prince Charles. Before the Dimbleby interview, and I didn't even know the Dimbleby interview was coming up. I wasn't really following the royals then. I just knew that he'd gone out to do jazz, and the phone rang. For once we had the phone connected, because we had the phone disconnected on and off a lot. And when I answered it, a lady with a very sexy voice said, "Is Thomas there?" And I said, "Oh no, sorry, he's gone out for jazz practice. Can I take a message?" And she said, "Oh yes, I'm in the jazz group. Tell him Sam called." So, my head was in a spin. I thought, I'll do some laundry and I'll do some ironing and I'll put the TV on, and there wasn't much on, so I put on the Dimbleby interview with Prince Charles. Now, great, he's King Charles and I fully support him, but I'm sorry, every time the guy speaks I just switch off. I start thinking of shopping lists or tax returns, or I don't know what he's talking about half the time. People talk about Meghan's word salad. Charles has been doing it for years. And then whenever Diana would talk, I'd like wake up and think, oh, I understand what she's saying. Or the Queen, oh, I kind of know what she's saying. Prince Philip, I definitely knew what he was saying. Princess Anne, I understand. But Charles would just waffle. Wherefore art thou? So this boring interview went on, and I'm ironing, and I'm thinking, so Sam's a girl. Brilliant. And then it got to the end of the interview where Dimbleby said, "Have you always been faithful to your wife?" To which Charles replied, I distinctly remember, and I put the iron up, and I thought, well, the royals are perfect, because I thought that at the time, at that particular moment. I didn't realise how fallible they were. I knew they were human, but I thought they were perfect humans. And I thought, well, he's going to say no. You know, of course I've been faithful to her. Always. And he did. He said, yes, of course. And I thought, and then he followed it up with, until things became irrevocably broken down. Now, I'm not a religious person like churchgoer, or into the head of the Church of England or anything like that, or leader of the faith. But I just thought, you cheeky monkey, one day you'll be king. And you've just said you're doing what my Thomas has obviously been doing. Now, I'm not perfect, you all know. I've had my slip-ups. That was a different situation. I'll go into that story. That was in order to escape a very bad relationship. Not that it makes it any better, but I was just so shocked. Prince Charles, you're supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to be perfect. You guys always crack on. You're so bloody perfect. Anyway, well, that was the beginning and the end with me and Thomas. 1995 was a very bad year, and I don't want to bring anybody down, but it just happened to be one of those really shitty years. I think Thomas was sent to prison again. I can't remember. He was always in and out of Nick for driving offences. Driving offences. David was still phoning me up. I was studying law, was studying A-level law. As you all know, the exams are normally in the May. My father died in the May. And, I cried out loud. I shouted. We knew he was ill, but I really didn't expect him to die. Age 64, just shy of his 65th birthday. It was awful. My mother was all over the place. She didn't know what to do with herself for about 3 or 4 years. She used to come round to my flat, cry on my shoulder. So I couldn't tell her I was in debt. And David phoning me up every 30 fucking seconds. And Thomas had run up a hell of a lot of debt on my flat, for which David blamed me, largely, because I was the one left there. I'm not going to cry on this, but it does upset me still, thinking of my dad. Round about the same time, I hadn't met Graham at that stage until I met Graham in 1997, so that was a couple of years later. But I didn't know who he was, but his father was dying of cancer and died in 96, so in 2 parallel universes, he wasn't having a particularly happy time either. So 95 was a bad year, and I decided not to sit my A-level law in the May because obvious reasons. I didn't really feel I was ready for it anyway, because Thomas had been just such a pain in the arse and really put me through the mill. So I decided to sit it in the resits in the November, and I didn't do very well. The invigilator insisted on having the windows open. It was virtually snowing outside, so my hands were like cramped. And I was really anti the system, and I put a few remarks in my papers about what I thought of the bench, as we call it, the magistrates, untrained laymen who cast judgment on their fellow man. It's a cheap way of justice. It's a free way of justice. They're unpaid. They're volunteers. Not going to go into the wheres and wherefores of that. So 1995 was a very, very shitty year. And then suddenly down the telly they said the Princess of Wales is going to give an interview on Panorama. And I thought, I want to watch that. I wonder what she's going to say. I had no idea. I didn't read newspapers in those days. I just watched the news, you know, ITV, BBC. And the only idea I got what was going on in the newspapers was when I went to go and fill my car up with £5 of fuel, because that's all I could afford at the time. And they had a magazine rack at the King Alfred petrol station in Hove with all the major newspapers, so I'd see her. I saw Princess Diana every single day at that time. If she wasn't on the front of a newspaper, she was on the news. Lunchtime news, then she was on the evening news. She was the feature of various television programmes. She was on magazines. People were talking about her all the time. I mean, Meghan, eat your heart out, really. Eat your heart out. No one wants to talk about you like they did Diana. Everyone was obsessed with her. I saw more of her than I saw of my own family. Seriously, more of her than I saw of my own mother. And it had been going on for years, so she was a very familiar face. And then there she was going to be on the telly. And I thought, I wonder what she'll say, especially about what Charles said. I wonder how she feels. And so I sat there cross-legged on the floor with my nose pressed up against the TV, and I watched every moment of that Panorama interview. And it made me feel better, because the way it came across to me, for once she said, I'm not perfect. I've fucked up. I've made mistakes. I have mental illness. She wasn't mad, but she said, I get depressed. I have eating disorders. She said, I like to go out and meet other people who've got problems because it helps take my mind off my problems, and they are actually supporting me. They don't even know they're supporting me. The worst thing she said was, yes, there were 3 of us in the marriage. And I'll give the girl that. She was entitled to say that. She also admitted she had an affair with James Hewitt. Now, a lot of people say, oh, Diana had loads of affairs, right? Charles only the one. Well, firstly, we just don't know for sure. But let's say it is true. You can fight affairs. What you cannot fight is when your husband or partner is in love with someone else. You can't fight that. Graham had that with his first marriage. His first wife left him for someone else, and he fought for her. I mean, this is like 15 years before I met him. And in the end, she said, I love him. Oh, I've just seen a mosquito, and I'm going to creep up on him. Gotcha. And in the end, Graham conceded, she loves him, she loves him. So that was it. The marriage was over. And they didn't have a custody battle. Graham said the children belong with their mother. And so they stayed with his first wife and her new husband. But Diana made me feel better because she said she wasn't perfect. I loved Diana because of her faults. And she was the first member of the royal family to say, I fucked up, I'm not perfect. It's one of the things I hate about Markle. I used to hate those puff pieces about, oh, Meghan's so perfect. She can do ballet, going backwards up the stairs whilst reciting Shakespeare in fluent Spanish, and she never gets anything wrong. And I just thought, fuck off, you plastic tart. Sorry to sound a bit anti-Meghan on that. But when people keep ramming it down your throat, oh, she's perfect, she's a multi-millionaire-ess, there's nothing going wrong in her life. And you just think, I can't believe that, because people do have problems, and that's how they become relatable. That's how the Princess of Wales, the late Princess of Wales, was relatable to me, and I had had a shitty year. In fact, I'd had a shitty few years, but at least I had Thomas with me. We were really tight for about 4 years. Well, I met him in 92, and it was all coming to an end, and it finally came to an end in 95. We stayed best friends. We remained friends. And I was friends with Pete McCary, the airline hijacker at that time. I used to pop round and see him once in a while. And I was friends with my friend, I think I called him Bobby, didn't I, with the fake mobile phone. And I used to pop round and see him once in a while. And of course my mother came round all the time because she'd moved down from Scotland because my father had died, and she used to just love coming round the flat and crying and crying and crying, and she didn't know what to do with herself. And I had to just sit there smiling and going, everything's going to be fine. And I couldn't tell her anything. I couldn't tell her anything about David. I couldn't tell her about debt collectors. I couldn't tell her what, oh God, would have just added to her problems. So the Panorama interview, I understand why Prince William doesn't want it ever aired again. I couldn't disagree with him more. It's a piece of history. It happened. A lot of people didn't like it. But I appreciated it. I appreciated her honesty. And what really did Charles a lot of damage was not her saying there are 3 of us in the marriage. There was a follow-up programme straight after with Nicholas Soames on it, who's one of his mates, who said, oh, she's clearly in the early stages of paranoia, thinking he's having an affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. Well, who's he married to now? I don't want to damage the monarchy, and I don't want to damage Charles or Camilla. I am a die-hard Diana fan, and I've thrown my weight and support behind Charles and Camilla. But Charles's friends have done him far more harm over the years than Netflix could ever do.